All right, diving in today, folks, and we're going deep, really deep.
Deeper than usual, huh?
Oh, you know it. We're talking The Diary of a Young Girl, Anne Frank.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Heavy stuff. I mean, that diary, talk about a first-hand account, right?
You can say that again. And let's not forget, when it first came out, people were skeptical.
Really? I mean, I guess it seems almost unbelievable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This young girl going through, all of that. So it makes sense. They needed proof.
Definitely makes sense. So how'd they do it?
The Netherlands State Institute for War Documentation. They took it on, investigated everything.
Wow. Thorough, huh?
You bet. And that's how we ended up with a critical edition, like the complete verified version.
That's got to be the one to read then.
Absolutely. And for our deep dive here, we're focusing on June 1942 to July 1944.
Okay, so right in the heart of it, basically.
Exactly. We're going to uncover what life was like for Anne, her thoughts, her feelings, the whole world around her.
All through her own words.
Exactly. So we're dropped right into Anne's world on her 13th birthday, June 1942.
A birthday in the middle of, well, everything going on.
Right. She talks about the Rin Tin Tin movie, how everyone loved it, all the gifts she got.
Like what? Simple things, right?
2 brooches, a bookmark, a couple of books, birthday stuff. But then she gets into talking about her classmates. And it gets interesting.
How so?
She doesn't hold back. She's super observant, almost critical.
Okay, examples. Spill the tea.
Okay, so she talks about Betty Blumendahl, saying, she seems poor, works hard, but maybe isn't the sharpest tool in the shed.
Ouch.
Yeah, then there's Cian, always getting into trouble. And then there's Jacques Kosernut. She says he and her friend G make her laugh like crazy.
So a bit of a class clown situation.
Totally. And then there's Harry Schopp, who she calls, quote, the most decent boy.
Setting the bar high there, Anne.
Right? And Werner Joseph, who's gone all quiet since things changed.
I mean, wouldn't you?
Yeah, for sure. But she's already picking up on all these, personality shifts. It's wild.
You can really see her mind working.
Totally. Oh, and then there's Sam Salomon. She calls him a real brat, but also says he's got an admirer. Maybe a little crush. Who knows?
Teenage drama, even then.
Always, right? And then Abby Ream, Orthodox Jewish, but also a brat, according to Anne.
Yeah.
She really sizes everyone up.
Sounds about right for a teenager.
Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then, just a few days later, on June 20th, she starts reflecting on the diary itself.
Like meta-diarying, a diary about the diary.
Right. She finds it weird. Why would anyone care about her thoughts?
Wow. Little did she know.
I know, right? But she also talks about this need to, let it all out, to get everything off her chest.
I feel that, especially at that age.
Totally. And she even takes us back to her school days. From Montessori to saying goodbye to her principal, Mrs. Cooperis, when she went to the Jewish Lyceum.
Where Margot, her sister, was already going.
Yep. Like little snapshots of a pretty normal childhood.
Which was quickly changing a bit.
Exactly. She mentions her family in Germany, how Hitler's laws were making things really hard for them, and her uncles having to escape to North America after Kristallnacht.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
Yeah. And then her grandmother came to live with them, too.
So a lot of upheaval even before going into hiding.
Oh, yeah. Things are definitely getting worse. And by June 20th, 1942, the restrictions on Jewish people in Amsterdam were so intense.
What kind of things are we talking about?
Curfews. When they could be out. Couldn't even sit in gardens after 8 p.m.
Whoa.
And they couldn't go to Christian homes, had to go to Jewish schools only. It was all changing fast.
I can't even imagine. So isolating, too.
Exactly. And she talks about her friend Jacques saying, I don't dare do anything anymore because I'm afraid it's not allowed.
Wow. Just that feeling of constant fear.
Exactly. Everything felt dangerous. And on top of all that, her grandmother had passed away earlier that year, in January.
Oh, no. So much loss.
Yeah. And she says this birthday was partly to make up for the sad ones before. They lit a candle for her grandma, too.
That's really touching. Holding on to those little bits of normalcy.
Absolutely. And even with all this going on, she's still a teenager. She talks about this boy. Hello.
A little romance.
Right. They talked on the phone, even met up. But then she got in trouble with her dad about being out past curfew.
Typical dad stuff. Protective,
Totally. But in their situation, it was more than just being strict. It was dangerous.
Yeah, real danger. Makes you see those parent-teenager conflicts in a whole new light.
For sure. She also talks about how her parents treated her differently than Margot, her sister. Margot broke the vacuum cleaner, no big deal. But Anne wanted to rewrite the shopping list, and she got scolded.
Classic younger sibling woes, always feeling like the rules are different for them.
Totally. And then, boom, life changes completely. They go into hiding in the Secret Annex in September 1942,
Their whole Wimold shrinks down to those few rooms.
and they depended entirely on this small group of people helping them. Miepke's, her husband Jan, Bep Voskiel, Mr. Voskiel, Mr. Kugler, and Mr. Kleiman.
Real heroes risking their own lives.
They really were. Mrs. Kleiman couldn't even be involved because it was too dangerous.
So risky for everyone.
It was. But even in hiding, and still growing up, she talks about how her dad is understanding and how she wishes they could talk more deeply.
That's really sweet, craving that connection with her father.
Yeah. And then you get these glimpses of life in the annex. Like, there's this whole thing about Peter Van Daan and this book about women.
Oh, this is the infamous forbidden book. I've heard about this.
But one and only.
Yeah.
Mrs. Van Daan was keeping it secret, but then Mr. Van Daan finds out, gets mad, and Peter gets punished for trying to sneak a peek.
Typical teenager, right? Curiosity got the better of him.
Totally. And everyone argues about whether the punishment was fair or not.
So much tension in such a small space.
Right. And then someone calls Anne ignorant. She doesn't say who, and she gets all determined to study hard.
That shows real character, not letting it get her down.
For sure. And she also mentions how Margot's allowed to read certain books that she's not.
The age-old sibling rivalry strikes again, always thinking the older one gets special treatment.
Always. We also see little things, like Mr. Van Daan wanting Anne to sit next to him at dinner.
These small details start to mean a lot when you're all cooped up together.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And Anne is picking up on everything, like how her mom criticizes people and teases Margot. All these little dynamics unfolding.
Makes you realize they were just a normal family trying to survive an insane situation.
Totally. And she really wanted to get her period, to feel like she was growing up. But her dad threatened to take away her diary.
Oh no, the ultimate punishment for a writer?
Right. She even imagines escaping to Switzerland in October 1942.
A little daydream to escape the reality?
Exactly. She describes everything: new furniture, spending money, freedom, basically.
It's heartbreaking knowing what she was actually going through.
It is. And then the news from the outside gets even worse. They start hearing about Jewish people being taken away by the Gestapo.
Oh man, that must have been terrifying.
They were sent to Westerbork in cattle cars.
Ugh.
Miep told them how horrible it was there. No food, hardly any water, terrible hygiene. They even shaved people's heads.
Dehumanizing them completely.
It's awful. And they started to realize that most of those people weren't coming back. The English radio even mentioned gassing.
Wow, that's when the reality of this situation must have truly hit home.
Absolutely. And Miep even had this elderly Jewish woman show up at her door begging for help.
Oh no.
Miep wanted to help, but it was too dangerous. One wrong move could have put everyone at risk.
This must have been some of the hardest choices to make.
I can't even imagine. But life in the annex went on. Anne found comfort in reading. Plays by Sissy Van Marksveld in Corner.
Finding escape through stories, it's a powerful thing.
It is. And even though they were going through so much, there were these little moments of good, like Anne, her mom, and Margot got close.
The power of family, even in those conditions.
Totally. And Anne was meticulous about recording things. Like in October 1942, they had a weigh-in, and she wrote down everyone's weight. She even mentioned she'd gained 19 pounds in 3 months.
Wow. Can't imagine having enough food for that in hiding.
I know, right? Getting enough to eat was a huge problem. They had to use the black market for ration books, and prices were going up all the time.
Constant stress on top of everything else.
It was. There's this funny story, though, about Peter having to move a sack of beans, and he drops it, and there are beans everywhere.
A little bit of chaos amidst the bigger chaos?
Exactly. It's kind of funny, actually. And then Mr. Van Daan created this thing called Prospectus and Guide to the Secret Annex.
Sounds like they were trying to find humor wherever they could.
Dark humor, but humor nonetheless.
Yeah.
Then Mr. Dussel arrived, and he brought even more news from outside.
Bad news, I imagine.
Yeah. He talked about the raids happening all the time and how much money they were offering if you turned in Jews.
That's like something out of a nightmare.
It really is. And he even compared it to slave hunts. That's how bad it was.
It's just horrific.
There was this other time, too, when Mr. Dussel tried to play dentist for Mrs. Van Daan.
Oh, no! What happened?
It was kind of a disaster. But it shows how they were all stuck together, having to rely on each other for everything.
No escaping those close quarters.
Nope. And then one night, the power went out, and they heard machine guns. It was terrifying.
Just the constant fear of being discovered.
Anne was freaking out, but her mom just lit a candle like it was no big deal.
Different ways of coping, I guess.
For sure. And Mrs. Van Daan was always worried about burglars and about
Mhm.
losing what few possessions they had left.
It's understandable in a way. Those things represented their old life.
Yeah. And anytime there was a noise, everyone would start whispering, freaking out that they'd been found.
It's like living in a constant state of high alert.
Mr. Van Daan would always start coughing at the worst possible moments, too.
Oh, no.
And when they were scared, they couldn't even use the water or go to the bathroom because of the noise.
Every little thing was a risk.
Even the Westertorn bells stopping would make them nervous.
Just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. Then Mr. Voskiel was gone for a while, and they weren't sure if he locked the door downstairs.
That's a big deal when your life depends on it.
It was. And they were always getting sick. Even a sore throat would send Mr. Van Daan into a panic.
Understandable, I guess, given the circumstances. They couldn't exactly go to the doctor.
Right. And then they heard this speech by Rauter, a high-ranking Nazi. He was talking about getting rid of all Jews in German-occupied territories. He even gave specific dates for different provinces. It was terrifying.
Things were escalating quickly.
They were. And the war was getting closer, too. The British bombed the Carlton Hotel in Amsterdam.
Bringing the fighting right to their doorstep.
It was. And the air raids were getting more and more frequent.
I can't imagine trying to sleep through that.
I know, right? And the food situation was getting really bad. They were always complaining. And there was this real divide between the people upstairs and downstairs.
Tensions rising over limited resources? That's bound to happen.
It was. Mr. Dussel was even hoarding food.
Oh, come on. Not cool.
Not cool at all. And then, to make matters worse, Mr. Voskiel got cancer.
Oh, no.
It was inoperable. And without him, they were even more cut off from the outside world.
And less safe, too, I imagine.
Yeah. And on top of all that, Anne and Mr. Dussel were always fighting about studying.
Cabin fever setting in?
Definitely. And the air raids were getting so bad that they had to have a whole routine for when the alarms went off.
Like a well-oiled machine, even for something so terrifying.
Mr. Kugler told them that the Fokker aircraft factory had been bombed, too.
Wow.
Things were really falling apart. Even little things like washing dishes would turn into huge arguments.
That close proximity, it just magnifies everything.
Totally. Anne was getting really critical of Mrs. Van Daan in her diary, too. They were definitely not getting along.
I bet.
It was so cramped in the annex. No privacy at all. Even Mrs. Van Daan's birthday was kind of depressing. She got a few measly gifts.
They couldn't exactly throw a party, could they?
No way. And Bep was getting totally burnt out from running errands for everyone.
She was under so much pressure.
She was. Anne was having nightmares all the time, too. She said she didn't think the world would ever be normal again.
That's so sad. Losing hope like that.
It is. But they tried to find ways to keep going. Even something like sorting beans could be a distraction.
Anything to pass the time and keep their minds off things.
Exactly. And Anne really missed her friend Hanley. They made a big effort to celebrate St. Nicholas Day, though, in December 1943.
Trying to hold on to tradition.
Yeah, they wrote verses for each other. Anne was starting to see her diary as, like, a memory book. And her feelings about her mom were changing, too.
Getting older, gaining perspective, even in hiding.
Yeah. She even talks about being self-conscious about bathroom talk and how she was feeling all these new things because of puberty.
She read an article about blushing, which made her feel better about it. So relatable, even now.
Right. And things with Margot were actually getting better. They were starting to understand each other more.
That's nice to hear. At least some good came out of that situation.
It is. And Anne was getting good at seeing things from other people's points of view. She used to feel like an outsider, but that was changing.
Real growth happening.
It was. But as things got worse outside, she started spending more and more time with Peter.
Finding comfort in each other.
Exactly. In January 1944, food was getting even more scarce, and they were arguing constantly. Mrs. Frank even said she didn't want to see Mr. Van Daan anymore.
Oh, wow. Things must have been really bad.
They were. Anne was starting to think a lot about human nature and the war. And then Mooshie, the cat, peed on the floor, and it turned into this whole thing.
A little comic relief.
Right. But even with those little moments, Anne was starting to feel really trapped in January 1944. Every day felt the same. She talked about how annoying Mr. Dussel was when he prayed on Sunday mornings.
The little things start to grate on you after a while.
Totally. She also felt bad for Peter, who seemed really lonely. He had his own space, though, which she envied. She would go up to the attic to be alone sometimes.
At least she had somewhere to escape to.
Yeah. Her relationships with her family were changing, too. She felt like she was more mature than them sometimes.
Growing up faster than she would have otherwise.
Yeah. Her parents even got upset that she wasn't as affectionate with them anymore. But she felt like they didn't understand her. She was getting closer and closer to Peter.
He was becoming her confidant.
Totally. They had this deep conversation on February 27th, 1944, and Anne realized how much his friendship meant to her.
A real connection in the midst of all that chaos.
It was. She even said that Margot was starting to feel left out.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Things got so bad at one point that Mrs. Frank actually slapped Anne.
Wow, that's intense.
It was. But Anne understood why it happened. They were all under so much stress. She was taking algebra lessons from her dad, which is a bright spot.
A little bit of normalcy in a very abnormal situation.
Yeah. And her feelings for Peter were getting really intense. It was different from a crush she'd had before.
Real love.
Maybe. But she wasn't sure if he felt the same way. There was one night when Peter didn't ask her to stay upstairs with him, and she was really upset about it.
The uncertainty must have been agonizing.
It was. They heard a plane crash nearby, which scared everyone. And then Anne and Peter had a conversation about sex.
Wow. That's a pretty mature conversation for teenagers in that situation.
They were growing up fast. On March 7th, 1944, she wrote this poem about how empty the days felt.
Time must have felt strange in hiding, like it was both standing still and flying by.
Exactly. And she was following the war closely, listening to the radio all the time. She got really frustrated with the adults because they would just repeat the same things over and over.
Imagine being stuck in those conversations with no escape.
It would drive me crazy. She even described what it was like listening to Churchill's speech. They heard about salutes in Moscow, and then the news that Germany had invaded Hungary.
Where a lot of Jewish people lived?
Yeah. They celebrated Mr. Van Dayen's birthday, but even that was kind of subdued. Anne was starting to realize how important schoolwork was, though. She wanted to be a journalist or a writer.
That's amazing considering everything she was going through.
She even realized that she had a real talent for it. Then, one night, there's this huge bang, and they thought it was the police.
Oh, that's terrifying.
It was. They were so scared they'd be discovered. But Anne was starting to feel more independent from her parents. After the scare, she and Peter talked, and her dad got worried about their relationship.
Protective dad, understandable.
Yeah. Anne was asking these deep questions about the war, about poverty, about why people are the way they are. She wasn't the same girl who went into hiding.
Experiences like that change you.
They do.
Yeah.
And then there's this other funny story about Mushi peeing on the floor again.
He was a troublemaker, that cat.
He was. And Anne was even curious about the Bible. She had this burning desire to write and was planning to publish a book called The Secret Annex.
Wow, she was really determined.
She was. Her parents found her and Peter together after dark and got upset, but she just thought it was funny. She talked about all the books Mr. Van Dayen was reading and how much she loved Holland.
Her home, even though it was turning against her.
Exactly. Then Bep got engaged, which Anne had mixed feelings about. And things got really scary again after something they called the Van Hoven business.
It sounds ominous.
It was. Anne was even afraid to be alone downstairs.
Always looking over her shoulder.
Yeah. She was reading about Franz Liszt and thinking about his character. Then it was her 15th birthday, June 13th, 1944.
Another birthday in hiding.
She got some nice gifts, but the invasion was happening, and she was watching how the Dutch people reacted to the British.
Mixed emotions, I'm sure.
Totally. Things with Peter were complicated. She wanted to be with him, but he wasn't always there for her. She missed being outside, being in nature, and she had to have some painful dental work done.
Even the small discomforts must have felt huge in that situation.
They did. Peter was talking about becoming a criminal or a speculator after the war, which worried her. She believed in working hard for happiness.
Such a contrast in worldviews.
It was. Then, in July 1944, they got a ton of strawberries, and everyone helped preserve them. It was a nice moment.
A little bit of sweetness in the midst of it all.
Yeah, but the doorbell kept ringing, which always made them nervous.
That sound must have been pure terror for them.
It was. Then they heard that someone had tried to kill Hitler.
Wow. Things were changing fast.
And it was all really uncertain. They didn't know what was going to happen next.
And sadly, we know what ultimately happened. But for Anne, in that moment, it was just another day in a life full of uncertainty and fear.
It's incredible what she went through. Reading her diary, you see this young girl growing up, becoming so mature and insightful, despite everything.
It's truly a testament to the human spirit, to find hope and even joy in the darkest of times.
And it makes you think, doesn't it? How do her experiences relate to the world we live in today? What can we learn from her about dealing with our own challenges?
That's the big question, isn't it? What does it mean to hold on to hope, even when things seem impossible? And Frank's story reminds us that it's possible and it's absolutely necessary.
Well said. And on that note, folks, we'll leave you to ponder that.
Until next time.
Until next time.